Right. 2 more seconds. Good morning, everybody, or good evening, wherever you might be. Okay. We are. All right. So good morning and good evening to those who are not in Melbourne. And of course, a warm welcome to you, Kivi. Thank you very much for joining us. And for those who don't know, Kivi is actually in Florida at the moment. And that's why we had to do an early morning for us. And of course, he's at the end of his working day. And so those of you who couldn't join us live on Zoom, of course, can watch it on Facebook later or on our YouTube channel. And it really gives me great pleasure to welcome Kivi. Now, Kivi, as you probably, a lot of people, I know when they saw the advert, Googled his name and saw, that he's an incredibly sought after speaker. As you see on the flyer, speaks at Fortune 500 companies as a motivational speaker, as an author of the book Lepidology, which for any business person, I think it's a must read. And so, more importantly, he's a mensch, and I really appreciate him giving of his time. As I said, it's not easy to secure him to talk, and he's doing it out of the kindness of his heart. He's not charging us, so thank you very much, Kivi, for doing that. And we really appreciate the chesed, the kindness, and sharing your wisdom with us this morning here. And the topic which we've chosen is when the world locked down man, it unlocked God. And of course, I'm sure we're all fascinated to hear your thoughts on that experience. Just a quick update: how are things currently in Florida on coronavirus?
Hi, well, good afternoon to you guys, Danny. So I'm in Miami Beach, Florida, where I live. So your question's an interesting one because, the bigger question is, how is the United States of America? It's going through a tremendous birthing pain, process right now, which is, in fact, an enormously healthy thing that it really should have done years ago. But this is precisely what we're going to touch on: divine surgical evolution of that, which needs to be, not particularly which we want to be. So this is the state of affairs in the United States of America, and we're just moving through doing what we have to do with regards to Corona and the virus itself. It has become such a political football, truly, that no one really has a clue as to what is and what is not, what the facts are, what they're not. And by the grace of God go we, is kind of your best bet. So numbers are up, they're down. What numbers precisely, I have no idea. Hospitalization versus fatality versus, infectious rate, who knows. I have a daughter that works in the ICU as a ICU respiratory therapist. That's where I get my data. And as we kind of, check in with her, we just get a reality as to, ventilation usage there, or otherwise. And it seems that the numbers are kind of way down right now in Florida itself. So who knows?
Yeah, but I think you're spot on in terms of it becoming so political. And of course, the tensions must be high there in the lead up to the election next week. So many people hearing their views and getting ready to cast their ballots.
Absolutely. So in fact, they're seeing the highest, pre-election day is November 3rd. The reason I actually know that is that's my wife's birthday. So as a South African coming to the United States, I had that booked in the calendar in either event. And November 3rd has always been an important day for me. So, but the fact is that you're seeing I read something earlier this morning, is actually the largest pre-November 3rd vote swath in the history of recorded election. Some 64 million people have voted at this point in time.
Jeez, that's incredible.
Yeah, that's almost half, by the way, of people that vote, period. So it's a phenomenon. So you're literally experiencing a phenomena, a historical phenomena. Fascinating.
It is fascinating, and just interesting. Just before we get to the actual topic, people saying a lot of people know you, Kivi, from your when you were picketing, as they say. Somebody's written me, he held you in his arms as an infant
Please, I appreciate. I thank you for that.
He did a good job, Tech, it looks like. But you know, it's amazing, and really, really, as I said, once again, an honor to have you here. So how do we kick off with this? Where do we start with such a topic? It's a tough one.
Right. So first of all, if I may, Rabbi, let me first please cordially thank you so much for the opportunity, and for the opportunity to share with your esteemed community, and, you know, vicariously through family, friends, you know, China's of yours back home. I get to see the work that you've done there and the work in the community. And you know, I had a daughter that was actually out. The respiratory therapist she spent a year in seminary in Australia, and I believe she was out there at your shul. But you know, it's a beautiful, beautiful thing to see, really, that, you know, in 2020 you have Jews that are conscious and deeply seeking connectivity and engagement and relationship, you know, with a higher transcendent being, and something that moves beyond self and beyond consumption of self. And that you have a rabbi in a leadership position who seeks to do precisely that, and to herd that, you know, consciousness into the community. And it's a magnificent thing. I mean, it's a phenomenon. And really, it actually speaks to the larger discussion that we're going to have. You know, when you take a look at what you guys have going over there, and sitting in Australia right now, doing your thing, you know, Shabbat is coming in a day. The ladies are going to take out Shabbat candles. Men are going to, you know, make kiddush and hamotzi, and they're going to sanctify what in the entire world is just a Friday night mundane table. And they're going to introduce an element of sanctity that says that I am a soul, not a body, that says that I am viable, worthy, eligible, and it is feasible for me to engage in a transcendent relationship with a material physical world, that it doesn't define me. It delivers me, but it doesn't define me to the world. This is massive. And it's 2020. And when you sit back and you think about this for a minute, that there were literally millennia, for millennia, there were attempts to flush that out. And there were people that dedicated massive amounts of resource, financial, social, infrastructural, national, to absolutely annihilate that notion. And that one of your magnificent ladies, one of your fabulous gentlemen, should come to a Shabbat table on a Friday night with a Kiddush cup, or light a Shabbat candle, and that you contemplate how much was thrown at that to insist that that never take place again in the world. And yet, on the 29th of October 2020, in the middle of a global pandemic and absolute global chaos in every single other arena, that is precisely and exactly what is going to happen. And Hitler and the Egyptians prior, and the Greeks prior, and the Romans prior, and a slew of other attempted leadership, from the Spanish Inquisition to Cossacks to marauding Russians, swore that it never would, and did everything they could to change that trajectory. And yet there it is. And your kids and your grandkids are going to watch you, and they're going to see you light that Shabbat candle, and they're going to hear dad or grandpa make a blessing on the challah. They're going to hear a tefillah, a lechadodi is going to be sung in the house. And this is an unbroken link in a chain that literally goes back thousands of years. It is, in fact, a phenomena. It's a miraculous event. And what I want to share with you guys, as we dovetail this into current events and the state of the world that we're living in right now, is that you need to kind of step back from the micro minutia of this virus as a biological ism, and you need to kind of look at it in the context of exactly this that we are speaking about. We are a construct of what the eye cannot see, of what the ear cannot hear. there is a phenomena about the Jew that is inexplicable. It is not defined by human construct, science, biology, sociology. Physical construct cannot actually tap the phenomena of this thing they call the Jew. How precisely has it existed so long? How do we actually stand up tomorrow and the guys are going to go off and they're going to lay to fill in, and the ladies are going to do their thing, and families are going to do their thing as a Jewish entity? How precisely can you explain it, if not by virtue of there is something magical, there is a phenomena that is inexplicable about this thing the world calls the Jew? So what happened with us, Rabbi, is that as we emerged out of the ashes of destruction in the late 40s, 50s, 60s, we kind of stepped into a place of human and civil, right edification and establishment. And in that package, the Jews fell, where rights that were absolutely deserving of all human existence became now applicable to the Jewish phenomena. And as we grew, not only did we exist, we began to strive. And not only did we strive, we began to thrive. And suddenly you're in the 90s and the 2000s and the 2010s, and we are not only thriving and succeeding, we are doing so at echelons that are literally inexplicable to the population percentage. The amount of distinction and elevation that the Jew receives, the amount of contribution that the Jew has made to the economic, sociological, scientific, medical, biological, mathematical world, literacy is inexplicable. It's not packageable in terms of, defined construct and empirical data, which is a world that I live in, being involved in the petrochemical engineering world. It's not explicable that you can kind of put it inside of an empirical data load and explain how this phenomena happens. How do we have so many Jews that are not even barely a percentage of world population that have succeeded to the level that they have, that have impacted the world to the degree to which they have? How does this happen? That have made such a significant and, by the way, unyielding contribution to humanity in absolutely every area and every sphere. And by the way, people don't spend enough time really unpacking this, because if you really do, it's boundless. I mean, once you start getting into where the Jew has actually put their finger, it becomes literally an extraordinary phenomenon. I'll just share with you that. So I had the opportunity to speak for Boeing Aircraft and their global leadership. And we were chatting, and I was in Seattle, and a guy, senior vice president, comes over to me who was Jewish, and he pulls me aside and he sneaks me to the side, and he kind of shares with me that he's head of development technologies for aviation systems for Boeing. He's a very high level, high ranking executive. And he very kind of quietly and almost embarrassingly whispered in my ear, he said, "You know that most of our technology comes out of Israel?" I said, "This I knew, but tell me something I don't know." He says, "I'll share with you. You can't flush a toilet on an airplane without the Jews." I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "The flushing systems in a toilet in an airplane are actually extremely involved, because you're dealing with a negative and a positive pressure function within a pressurized environment. And there's very, very sensitive technology that's actually used to make sure that at no time whatsoever is there a negative or what's called a declined negative pressure from the flushing system, which can happen if too many of the toilets are being used at the same time. And the dependency on the calibration of the sensors that measure this pressure have to be so absolutely precise you can blow up an airplane, literally. And it's like an incredible phenomenon. And he says the system that is trusted and has been used for years and most trusted comes out of a tiny little office sitting in Israel somewhere over there. And if I could repeat stories to you tenfold on this, you have no, let me just share with you that I was once, there's a small little company called MetLife. MetLife is the largest distributor, actually they're present there. MetLife is the largest distributor of annuities in the world, baseline annuities. And in 2016, they rolled out their new annuity program that was going out to all the brokers, all over the USA. And they held a massive conference in Las Vegas, about 6,000 of their brokers. And I had the privilege of being the opening keynote speaker. And just before me, they had this guy, his name was Holt McGee, Mr. Holt McGee. He was their vice president of financial instruments. He comes out and he says, ladies and gentlemen, we have a surprise for you. They wanted to introduce the architect of this MetLife product that was now being rolled out, right, to MetLife across the whole selling spectrum. And he says, it gives us tremendous pleasure. And literally, this is exactly what he said, to introduce to you MetLife's chief annuity architect, Professor, Dr. Rabbi Moshe Zalalinsky. Now, I want to ask you a question. You think this guy's Jewish? I want to ask you another question. MetLife does something like $14.5 billion a year. You don't think they have a budget to go to Harvard, Stanford, to go to Ivy League universities across the world? You don't think they can go to Cambridge School of Economics and pick, literally cherry pick, the brightest, the best in the industry globally? They couldn't find, some genius, Korean, Japanese mathematician guy. They have to find the one Russian Jew whose grandparents probably came out of a gulag somewhere, whose mother hid in a basement to light Shabbat candles. They had to find that one guy, and he's the guy that has to design MetLife's global annuity product. You see, what I'm asking you is, so many people attempted to destroy his existence for millennia, for generations. How is it that not only he exists, but he thrives? And he finds himself up into the minuscule percentage and echelon where the vast majority of humanity just doesn't arrive? How is this? I mean, you build a movie industry in Hollywood. You can't find some lovely, nice, young Irish lady by the name of, Deborah Shank to come and build, Hollywood. You've got to get a guy whose first name is Menachem and changes it to Mark MGM Grand. I mean, you want to build Las Vegas into, what Las Vegas is. You've got to find 3 Jews that come together and build it. You can't find some really nice, smart Presbyterian guy or some United Methodist guy who's, just conventional guy doing his thing. How is this? What is this phenomenon? And I'm telling you, it is unbelievable. And what I'm sharing with you, my brothers and sisters, is that we are now discovering during this COVID period, we are visiting with the space unseen, with the space unheard, uncomputed, microcosmic to an extent that it's literally virtually invisible. We are dealing with a time period where Hashem, the creator of the universe, has said there exists a phenomena known as the Jewish people. And here's what's happened with you. You have literally blended and taken for granted your existence. You have made yourself part and parcel in such a finessed and in such a productive way. You have sort of just folded into the tribal existence of humanity, and you have literally forgotten the miraculous nature of your existence. And by the way, when I say you, I mean you individually, and I mean humanity globally. There is a phenomena known as the Jew that is there to uphold the inner sanctum of consciousness in the world. That what you see is not what you get. That this apple doesn't just come from a grocery store. That carton of milk didn't just come from a dairy. Things have an origin. Things have a source. They don't just live in a vacuum. They originate from a larger transcendent being. There's one singular nation on earth I'm going to designate with the responsibility of being conscious and aware of this, of being singularly focused on the fact that we are here to announce to the world that things have an origin, they have a source. They exist by virtue of the fact that God wills them to do so. And they will be the nation that goes out into the world. This is not a prejudice, this is a privilege. This is not a bias, it's a responsibility. This doesn't make you better than. What it does is it makes you more responsible for. And I have to share with you, on a very personal note, that during this COVID period, you know, watching the world move from having answers to everything to having answers to nothing in every single sphere and in every single sector, the genius investor, genius, who made millions of dollars, on December or November 2019, closed on a corporate tower in Chicago or in New York, that he thought he got it 30% below market, is hating life right now with such a passion you have no idea. Because everything we knew is no longer viable and applicable. The conventions we operated with just simply don't work. So we're kind of seeing the world, right, that we had such visual clarity on, suddenly become unclear. We know nothing about anything at all. And so Hashem decides that about 7 weeks ago, 8 weeks to 3 months ago approximately, I wake up in the morning and I suddenly have a bunch of floaters in my right eye. I say to my wife, something's not right here. I go to an emergency room. There's actually here in Florida a dedicated 24/7 eye emergency room. Guy looks at it, lady comes in, she looks at it, says, I think you got this, that going on, but nothing particularly urgent. My gut said something's not right about that. I phoned up a friend. He said, go see a guy, a retinal surgeon specialist. Turns out I had a detached retina, right? I have a detached retina in my right eye. That's why I've got this beautiful green bracelet on. I have a gas bubble at the back of my right eye. So slowly but surely, it's thank God reducing. And he said, you need surgery within 10 hours. And through the grace of Hashem, thank God I had the surgery. By the way, I was looking up there, watching you. They do this while you're awake. I'm watching this surgery, and through my other eye, I see that it's imprinted on this laser, which probably costs several $1 million, right? They give you a nerve block, but you're actually awake watching your own surgery. It's freaky beyond. Do not recommend it. I see there a piece of equipment that's attached to what I'm assuming is this laser. And my left eye, I'm just like, they covered it and then they uncovered it for some reason for a period of time. When they uncovered it, I'm kind of reading there, and it says made by Nireh. I'm thinking Nireh, just apropos our previous discussion that we just had a few moments ago. Nireh means in Hebrew to see. It's a passive construct of to see. So it's a piece of optical equipment made by Nireh. When I went for my checkup to Dr. Gary Scheinbaum, who's rated as one of the top 4 retinal surgeons apparently in the country, Jewish guy, I said, who's this Nurek company, by the way? He says, yeah, that's the magnet that takes data coming in through the laser and it puts it up, it records it and puts it up in high pixelation for observation outside of the laser on a screen. I said, where's it made? It said in Israel, outside of Tel Aviv. So I go to the Baptist Eye Center, Surgery Center, the Baptist Eye Hospital, you know, organization in Miami, Florida, is using equipment made in Israel on their laser, which, by the way, is made in Germany by Zeiss, which is probably under IP in Israel. Another story altogether. But what I'm trying to share with you is, here we have this phenomena, right? All of a sudden, for 6 weeks, I can't see out of the, you know, the eye is healing, and thank God, through the grace of Hashem, I have sight in about 80% of it right now, 85% of it. This little bubble is bubbling at the bottom over there. My point is that for about 4 weeks, I'm looking through one eye. The world is flat. It's no longer multi-dimensional. I lose all depth of field perception. World's flat. And it suddenly strikes me that this is how we've gone through the world. We thought we had clarity. We thought we had answers. We thought we had vision. We thought we had precision in what we were seeing. But we're seeing the world as a single dimension. There is a whole other entire multi-dimensional factor to the world that exists, layers and levels of platitudinal existence that is beyond what our eye can see, what our brain comprehends, what our ears hear, what we truly understand. And so we land up living in a singular platitude that's flat and multidimensional. We think it's actually singularly dimensional, because that's all we see, and that's kind of what we could take a grip on. Turns out there are multiple layers of dimension that we actually are not seeing, that we don't have a clue on. And it's fascinating how Hashem has sent us this virus to expose the flaw, right? The flawed thinking, this adaptation of the idea that we actually have a grip on things, that we're actually banked in, that we actually have a notion. I've got eyes on this. I've got sight on this. I have a clear and unabated vision of what my life should look like, my wife should look like, my husband should look like, my kids should look like, my shul, my rabbi, my family, my car, my business, my bank account. And it turns out, actually, you have a vision on nothing. You haven't seen a thing. It was all an illusion. What you thought you saw and had clarity on is a single slither and slice that cuts across a singular dimension that you really have no understanding of. And watch, I'm going to show this to you, world. I'm going to send you something that is not visible to the naked eye. That is not, you cannot smell it, hear it, taste it. You cannot see it. And it will literally decay and deconstruct all of the aspects of human civilization as you know it. It will creep into places and spaces that you think it has no business being. And it will start to create decay and deconstruction of social norms and phenomena and conventions of society that you absolutely thought you had a grip on, total grip. You know, we have scientists, social data science. These are people that have many PhDs behind their name that'll come and tell you exactly how human behavior conducts themselves when they walk into large environments, when they walk into shopping centers, into the aisles of stores, into large social environments that can then kind of algorithmically outlay buying habits, consumption habits, execution habits. And actually, it turns out that all of that will just dissipate because I'm going to lock everyone down. People are not going to move the same way. There's going to be psychological impact into the decisions people make about where they go, how they go, if they go. And this is going to creep into socioeconomic issues This is going to creep into familial, communal issues. And it's going to literally rewire society as you know it today. And it's going to spill into places that you had absolute conviction of. You're going to hear leadership clueless. These are leaders that you thought had answers. They don't even know the questions. You're going to find infrastructural leadership running around literally like a chicken without a head. Rabbis, priests, imams, religious leaders, no idea as to how to advise community, to engage community, disengage it, come together in prayer, not come together in prayer. You can have medical professionals, scientific, global leaders of science and sort of, medical matter. One day this, next day that. Total confusing and conflicting information. Total. By the way, contradictory information. Information that says absolutely this way, absolutely that way. Everyone must wear a mask. Everyone must not wear a mask. Masks save lives categorically. Masks actually don't save lives categorically. Wash your hands 5 times with water, twice with sanitizer. Actually do it the other way around. Don't use soap, only use sanitizer. Use sanitizer, don't use soap. And so here's what's happening. Much data is just being pounded in, right, to the headspace. The brain is taking in multiple bits of data from multiple sources. Some of it fluent, some of it totally contradictory and confluent. This leaves you and I in the middle of all of this. So my question to you is this, and with this, I leave you. Who is the leader? Where is it definitive? Who can tell me definitively? Where do I get absolute information and data from as to what I need to do in my life to point north on the compass? How do I definitively keep myself safe physically, spiritually in these times? How do I keep balanced, healthy? How do I maintain a central stability? How do I not get off kilter mentally, emotionally, socially? How do I balance out spiritually? How do I still have a relationship with God when I can't go to services, when I cannot go to a shul easily, when the shul can't easily come to me, when I cannot sit with people and family and friends easily at a Shabbat table and engage and soak in spiritual transcendence? How do I do this? And who can tell me definitively where that is? And my brothers and sisters, what I want to share with you is that there is a fascinating transition that has taken place. Fascinating. And if we miss this and we don't get this clearly, we will come out of this period. And by the way, there's tremendous, massive opportunity on the other side of this. We are going to explode into an incredibly vibrant, dynamic, newly birthed, revisited world, because we've just spent the last year, 2020, putting everything under the microscope, searching for clarity, revisiting things. A lot of things that needed to be turfed out, we've re-imbued them with new energy. This is the process. This is the discovery. It's unbelievable. By the way, it's going to take you to a place of rebirth in 2021, 22, massive, huge. You have a whole new purview of relationships, of the way you see things. You've been locked down in your home. You know what's happened? You've discovered things about your house, about your home, that you actually never knew. You found places and spaces. You've repurposed places and spaces in a way you never would have in 1,000 years have thought of prior. You've discovered new things about relationships with your spouse, your children, your mailman, your FedEx guy, things that your Amazon delivery guy that you absolutely would never have touched previously. You found nooks and crannies in your house that that are little spots that you use as you go through your day. This is where you go in the morning. This is your afternoon routine. Here's your cup of tea routine. You like to spend the evenings here because you've taken space, and instead of you working for it, it's working for you. And this, by the way, is spilling out to all corners of your life. You're revisiting all of these things that had you by a leash, and you are repurposing them. I know it. You're developing a whole new relationship with your smartphone, with your phone. These things that electronically dictate us. We're managing them instead of it managing us. When was the last time you put it aside? You're 24/7, you're sitting in your house, you're locked down with social media. Here's what you did. You carved out a time where you said to your spouse, I'm done. Must speak. Genoeg sein. It's enough of this already. And this is how it happened. You've gotten off the hamster wheel in a lot of areas of your life. You've purposefully, you know how many people are out there now when they exercise? They're listening to the sounds of nature. They refuse to be plugged in because they're so plugged in at home. You see, all of this is unfolding. This is a whole new world of discovery that's taking place. And my dear friends, this is going to birth us, and it's literally going to propel us into an incredible space of consciousness. Conventions that we used to take for granted, we're not going to. How is it that a married man goes into a meeting and gets introduced to a business associate who happens to be a female, who's also a married lady, and they give each other a big hug and a kiss? Why? How'd that happen? That's not appropriate. Why are they touching each other? They don't belong to each other. That space used to be sacred. It used to be hallowed ground for decades and millennia. Suddenly we found ourselves in a postmodern world where all bets are off and everything's off. Absolutely. Absolutely everything, whether you should touch someone that is not your spouse, is off the table, as much as gender selection is off the table. So nothing is clear, right? All of a sudden we're revisiting these sort of complicated little tricky spaces, and we're going to take them in to the new world that we live in, because we've now revisited and we own them. It's going to bring us to a magnificent, magnificent space. I'm just sharing that with you, just tangentially. But what I'm here to tell you is that it doesn't exist anywhere. There is no leadership. There is no absolute, someone who can definitively tell you where north is on your compass. There is no Alexa. There is no quick fix. There is no absolute recipe. My dear friends, it lies with you. You are your leader. You are literally where the buck stops. You are the one that has to manage and maintain your health physically, spiritually, socially, economically. There is no institution, there's no organization, there is no rebbe, rabbi, priest, imam that can do this for you. It lies with you. It lies with you. You are captain of your own ship. You've known this intuitively, but you did what we all did. And we looked for a place where we could just deposit it and find it. It doesn't exist. It's with you. It is absolutely with you. You are stepping into a world now where you have to manage your ethic, your morality, your financial, communal, familial success. It lies with you. You'll take bits and pieces of information, you'll process it, you'll digest it. As a Jew and a Jewess, you have an extreme advantage against other nations of the world. that have to intellectually process, delineate, weigh things up, construct them against data and information, you have an advantage. You can fall back on thousands and thousands and thousands of years of data, tradition that is part of your Jewish lexicon, that lies in the books of the Torah, that has laid out a path for us, that has roadmap for us what healthy living actually looks like, what viable, happy, vibrant, robust living looks like, socially, economically, religiously, familially. And these are magnificent, magnificent benefications that you have. You can ask the rabbi, Rabbi, what is the Torah opinion on forgiving a tenant who's renting a piece of property of mine that cannot pay me and is on the virtue of going bankrupt, but I happen to know is a Jew? Can I sue him in a secular court? What can I do with him? How can I impose, penalty on this? You can fall back on thousands of years of tradition where this has been visited. But my friends, if you're going to look to something to give you the definitive answer, it simply doesn't exist. It lies with you. You are it. You are literally it. And now I'm going to share with you the back end of that. And that is, not only are you it, you are it for the entire nation of the world. The whole entire world is looking at the Jew for where the answer lies, literally. And if you think that's not the case, rethink it. It's absolutely the case. They are looking for you not only, by the way, for the vaccine, which is going to come out of an Israeli company, not only for therapeutic pathway, management, strategic management of it. They are looking at you, the Jew, as to how you emerge from this and come out of this successfully, as we have done so many times for millennia. And the answer to this is that we are tied to something higher. We live in this world, but we are not of this world. We are not a physical body that has a spiritual experience every once in a while. We are a spiritual being, a holy sanctified soul that is delivered in a physical body in the world. And we are aware of that. We are conscious of that. We succeed, we do what we need to do. And as we do so, we become a light to the nations of the world. And I'll simply just close by telling you this small little story. And with this, I close and I yield. You need to understand that you are it. It lies with you. You are the next link in the chain. You are Judaism today. You are morality. You are ethic. You are robust civil living in a contemporary world. That's what you are. That's who you are. And you will be a light unto the nations. And you cannot help but give it to others. I just want to share with you that I want to tell you a little story. In 2012, I spoke for a small little company called Tupperware. And Tupperware, they were having a global sales meeting in Orlando, Florida. I was speaking at 7 p.m. in the evening as their opening keynote. And I did a sound check at about 4 o'clock in the afternoon. It was at the Marriott, Excelsior Marriott in Orlando. And it was a massive event there. And I did my sound check, and as I'm walking off, the CMO, the chief marketing officer, whose name was Mercedes Bernhard, she comes over to me and she says to me, Kivi, can I just ask you a favor? Mr. Richard Going was his name, who was the then CEO of Tupperware. Says he's in a meeting right now with O&M Ogilvy Mathis on marketing. Massive meeting that we're having, because Tupperware was about to rebrand. They were about to launch their brand new logo, the new purple logo, and they were about to launch their electronic platform. They were getting a big hiding from Rubbermaid, who was beating them on the electronic platform side. and they were just about to roll out they've always, typically, they do these Tupperware parties, right? And so this was their opportunity to kind of roll out the electronic platform and start doing direct, B2C business. And he says, he'd like you to join the meeting for a moment. Is that okay? I said, please, be my honor, my pleasure. So he takes me into the meeting. She takes me in, and I come into the small little room that was kind of down the hallway. And there were these 10, 12 people sitting around a table. Now, Mr. Richard Goings, by the way, is known as an extraordinarily eccentric guy. He was actually from the UK originally. And he'd been, he heralded Tupperware into a $6 billion business, for over 30 years. And but he was an extraordinarily eccentric guy. He wore French cuffs, but he never buttoned them, or he never put a cufflink through it. That was his demarcation. I walk in there, and as I walk in there, he turns to me, he says, "Come sit over here," and he points down like this, "Come sit over here." And he puts me right next to him. And I sit around the table, and I see that up on a screen, there's the logo, Tupperware. And underneath it is their tagline, "Keeping it contained," which for decades had been their tagline, Tupperware, keeping it contained. And he turns to me and he says, "These are the executives from Ogilvy Mathis." He says, "We're in a meeting and we're having a discussion. We're about to launch the new logo. And we don't know whether to keep the tagline or not. Keeping it contained." And he literally turns to me in front of everyone there, and he says to me, "What does the Jew think? Should we keep it? Should we not?" Instead of filing a class action suit against him for discrimination and anti-Semitic remark, I literally turned to him and I said, "You know what, Mr. Goings, that's an excellent question, and you've asked the right people, because the Jews know this business well. Let me explain something to you. The answer to your question is entirely dependent on what your plans are for Tupperware. If you want Tupperware to remain where it is historically, where it's always been, if you want it to just be pegged in the market and keep that placeholder inside of that space and just do the business that it's done conventionally in a formatted, predictable manner, keep the tagline. But if you want it to exponentially explode into an entirely different stratosphere that is above and beyond anything else that's out there, you have to scrap it. Because one thing about the Jewish people, we don't keep anything contained. We don't do containment. That's not us. We don't contain anything. What we have, we share with the world. We have bright, brilliant ideas, we share it with the world. We have morality, we have ethic, we have a notion of social construct, we share it with the world. The reason the Jew is here today, Mr. Going, and I'm sitting next to you at a table in Orlando, Florida in 2014, is because we don't keep anything contained. So actually the answer to the question lies entirely with you as management. You want to keep Tupperware contained where it is? Keep the tagline. You want it to literally explode into a new platitude of existence, into a whole new level of business? Scrap it. It's an awful tagline. No one said a word. You could hear a pin drop. He turns to me. He says, "Thank you. That's all we need." I said, "Have a great day. All the best. See you later." I got up and I walked out. And I'm simply sharing with you, each and every single one of you, you're a light unto the nations. You are leadership. Not only will you lead yourself, your family, your immediate environment, you will be a light unto the nations. You will show Australia what it looks like to emerge from this in every single sphere. May God bless you. May it be an incredible, incredible experience and a journey. Know that it is with you. It lies nowhere else but with you. And Hashem has put it there over the course of 5,000 plus years and He seeded it with you. Love it, embrace it, live loud and proud and enjoy. May God bless you all.
Wow. Kivi, geez, that was, wow. I don't know where to start just to process what you shared with us. But I think one thing that really, I mean, so many of the things you said are so much food for thought, but I think it's that opportunity right now. You know, if we don't get to that conscious level of what you've described, we don't want to go back to where we were. We don't want to keep it contained. I love that story, you know, because keeping it contained is not appropriate right now. I want to ask you something. We don't have much time left, and if anyone does have a question, you can put it in the chat box. But there's a story that I've told a number. I've used it in when I was in Doncaster at one of my Rosh Hashanah sermons and in South Caulfield, and I'm pretty sure I heard it from you. I wanted to verify that today, and if it is the story I heard from you, I would love you to share it just before we close, because I think it relates so much to what you've spoken about today. And I think I heard it from you years ago, where you spoke about you were in some company. It could have been in Japan, and the CEO took you to his office and he showed you a painting and he asked you how much it's worth. That is your story, isn't it?
Right.
So I don't know if you are happy to share the details of that story in closing. If you know which story I'm talking about, do you recall what I'm talking about?
Yeah, absolutely.
I think it's about that. I think that's everything you've said ends up with that concept, and I think the world has an opportunity now.
It's very true, Rabbi. And in the computer, as I was going into the filing drawer to pull out a closing story, I maybe should have, done it. You're right, because it really does perfectly kind of dovetail with what we're talking about, right?
And I have said, I always say it in your name, so I have brought peace to the world.
Amen. So, yep. So I had the privilege of speaking for the Mitsui Corporation.
That's right.
And that's one of the largest trading organizations in the world, right? So I don't speak, Japanese, but my English sometimes sounds like Japanese. So they had a simultaneous translator, and it was actually a phenomenal experience. But it was I believe an 8 p.m. platform. It was in Tokyo. And prior to that, at about 2 o'clock in the afternoon, the meeting planners brought me to the Mitsui Tower to meet some of the executive team there. And, I'm a tall guy, and, there's a lot of sort of cultural appropriateness that you have to be conscious of and aware of. And it's very important to have, to understand these things. And I'd kind of gotten some training just in general, because I was in China a lot about, Asian greeting customs, etc. Although the Japanese are very specific cultures, but the tradition is you show an open palm and a hand, put a business card in there. So the meeting planner says to me that Mr. George Kim would actually like to meet you. And he was up on the 26th floor of the Mitsui Towers, and he's very, very high ranking. He's actually Korean, and he was head of Pacific Asia Logistics and Operations for Mitsui Corporation, senior vice president, very high ranking executive. Anyway, the point is, I went up, I met him, and in general, they people are very few words, but he was particularly quiet. And, I extended a greeting to him, and he didn't say anything at all. He just kind of took his finger like this, and he ushered me over to the corner of his small but plush office, and there in the corner was this kind of leather couch setup, and there were these very sophisticated lights kind of highlighting this piece of art on the wall. And he just ushered me over to it like this. And I'm standing there and I'm looking at this piece of art and I'm towering over him. I really wanted to sit down to not make him uncomfortable. But he just stood there with his hands behind his back and he's looking at it. Doesn't say a word. And then eventually he kind of just says to me, he says, Mr. Kivi, how much you think piece of art on the wall? And I said, how much is the piece of art on the wall? I mean, so I lean in to kind of take a closer look at it. And I see that there's actually a Picasso signature on the wall, on the piece of art. And I can see by all of this infrastructure, right? So, like we were talking about before, we're Jewish. So everyone, every Jew that's gone to a restaurant sits down, and while they're waiting for their food to be delivered to them, they come out of the evening, they know exactly the net take of the restaurant by the end of the night. How many tables divided by how many waiters divided by average, food lick per table. So I look around, I'm looking at all this, infrastructure, I'm looking at all the security for this piece of art. I'm assuming this is the infrastructure. Can you imagine what the piece of art is worth? I mean, I said, Mr. Kim, I don't know, maybe $2-3 million. It's a Picasso, I'm thinking, right? So he thinks it's the most hysterical thing he's ever heard in his life, and he's laughing. He says to me, no, Mr. Kivi, not how much insurance for art, how much you think piece of art on the wall. So I'm like, I said, Mr. Kim, I don't know. I mean, if insurance is $1 million a year, I mean, I don't know what's a piece of art. Anyway, eventually he says, this is an original Picasso worth $26.1 million that they paid at Sotheby's for this piece of art on the wall. And I'm thinking, like, 26, I mean, can you imagine what the rabbi, the shul in Caulfield could do with $26 million, right? And it's sitting up on the wall in the 26th floor of the Mitsui Tower. But anyway, the point of the matter is, I was very impressed by this, and I'm looking, I said, wow, what an honor and a privilege to be able to, and I re-engaged this piece of art, because now it's got value, right? It's got excessive value. And I'm like, hang on a second, I've got to take a look at this piece of art. And I kind of lean in and I look at it and I engage it, and I'm like, wow, and I'm looking at the signature Picasso on the right-hand side. And then I kind of just look at my watch to, like, maybe we can just sit down and chat. And I kind of start heading back to the couch. And as I do, Mr. Kim says to me, Mr. Kivi, he says, what do you think? He says, what do you think the worst thing you can do for a piece of art on the wall? And I'm like, what is the worst thing that I can do to a piece of art on the wall? I said, Mr. Kim, if I go up to this piece of art and I shred it in half, I mean, that is the worst possible thing I can do to this piece of art, destroy it. And he said to me something fascinating. He said, and this is just standing there with his hands behind his back. He says, no, Mr. Kivi. That's not worst thing you can do for a piece of art on the wall. If you come to art and you tear in half, it's original Picasso, idiot, tear in half, but original Picasso. So that's very interesting. I got it. What, now can we sit down? He says, what do you think worst thing you can do? So now I have the thread. I understand what he's saying to me, what he's communicating to me. Where intrinsic value lies is in the fact there's a piece of Picasso. So I said, no, I understand what you're saying. So you know what, Mr. Kim, the worst possible thing you can do to this piece of art on the wall is if I go downstairs to the hardware store, I come back upstairs with paint and a paintbrush, and I start to superimpose my genius on Picasso's genius. I totally devalue it, right? Entirely devalue this picture. I'm schlepping around with my paintbrush and my can, and I paint on Picasso's piece of art. To which he says, no, Mr. Kivi. If you go to hardware store, you buy paint and brush, and you paint on Picasso. It's original Picasso, idiot paint on, but original Picasso. I said, okay, hang on a second, I understand this, fantastic. And then immediately he says, what do you think is the worst thing you can do? Now I get it. I've got it. I understand what he's communicating here. I said, you know what, Mr. Kim, I hear you. Actually, the worst possible thing we could do for this Picasso, take it off the wall where people can't see it. Put it in a vault and lock it in a vault for all time. Throw the key away in the Atlantic Ocean. Remove it from society. Remove it from human contact. Here is this genius piece of work, which, by the way, looked like something my kid drew in 5th grade. But nonetheless, here is this Picasso, which you paid $26 million for, and we are going to remove it from human contact. We're going to remove the capacity and ability of human beings to be able to engage this magnificence and understand it for what it is. He says, Mr. Kivi, if you take original Picasso, you put it in a vault. It's an original Picasso that an idiot put in the vault. I'm thinking, how do you ultimately devalue? And before he could say it again, I said, Mr. Kim, why don't you just share with me, sir, what is actually the worst possible thing you can do to this piece of art? And he stopped speaking. He walks over to the piece of art. He reaches into his pocket and he takes out of his pocket, I'll never forget it, a small little, like a nail, a small little zipper, leather zipper, little thing he had, and he unzipped it, and he takes out of it a tiny little nail clipper, and he goes like this around the signature. He says, Mr. Kivi, the worst thing you can do to this piece of art on the wall is cut out the signature. He said, you leave the piece of art pristine, perfect. You don't touch it, but you cut out the signature. And then he turned to me and he said, Picasso with signature, $26 million. Picasso, no signature, no dollar. And you see, I turned around and here's what happened. For the first time in my life, actually like a bolt of lightning, I actually understood what it means to be an observant Jew. See, it's not about adherence. That's not at all what it's about. It's about conscious observation of God's signature in the world. That's where the value lies. To take an apple from your beautiful basket on your table and understand its intrinsic value is that this thing originates from something that the eye doesn't see and the ear doesn't hear. That it has a value that is beyond it. This comes from a creator. As the rabbi was saying, this dovetails into what we were chatting about. Things have an origin. And when I connect those dots, I bring ultimate value to them. So an observant Jew is actually the Jew that walks into a business meeting, closes a deal they've been working on and says, ladies and gentlemen, I just want to take a moment to thank God for this opportunity. That's an observant Jew or Jewess that has seen God's signature. A doctor who finishes a surgical procedure and says, great job, everyone. Thanks very much. Well done. Who takes a second to just say, and I'd like to take a moment to thank God. That's an observant Jew. That's an observant Jew. This didn't happen in a vacuum. See, they're recognizing God's signature in the world. That's where the value lies. And Rabbi, that's the story that happened. And it is always stuck with me in my head.
Even though I heard it some time ago, it was riveting to hear it again, honestly, because it's one of my favorite stories. And thank you for sharing it with us. And I think that is ultimately what you've been saying for the last hour or so, that it's our opportunity now to not squander and cut off the signature, because it's unfortunately been taken off for years, beforehand. And
absolutely,
we as a Jewish nation, and anyone can be part of the Jewish nation, anyone who wants to take on that responsibility can
absolutely
to show their signature. But all mankind, it's our time to ensure that the Picasso stays at $26 million.
Absolutely, to recognize core value.
So thank you for that, and thank you for sharing. And honestly, just such powerful stuff to make sure that we adhere to. And I love what you said. It's not about relying on the rabbi or some motivational speaker. Those are all tools to help you, but ultimately, you've got to do it yourself.
Absolutely.
So thank you very much, Kivi, and God willing, we will be able to continue to connect and to share
Please
wisdom, to hopefully get you out here.
Please God,
and travel, and when the signature of the world allows it.
That's exactly right. And wishing all of you guys just a Shabbat Shalom, and may you continue to just bring light to the world as you guys do. It's a phenomenon. It's an absolute phenomenon. And may God just bless you with health and with everything that you need. And to you, Rabbi, continued health and success to you and your family.
Amen. To you and yours, and you should have strong vision going forward.
Amen.
In all sense of the word.
Amen.
Thank you, everybody. Have a wonderful rest of the day, and keep posted with some upcoming events which are exciting. And really, once again, a massive thank you from us at South Caulfield and me personally to you, Kivi, and only brachas and simchas ahead. Thank you, everyone. We're going to end the meeting.
Look forward.
Bye-bye.